Hi everyone, it's Stephanie here and welcome back to the My Favorite Things YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be creating a birthday card, but I wanted to create a card that could also double as a 4th of July card. I know that everyone in the United States is celebrating the July 4th holiday tomorrow, so I wanted to create a card that could be used as a birthday card, but could also double as a card that you could give to someone on the 4th of July. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Big Birthday Balloons die set, and I've cut out 2 balloons from 2 pieces of typewriter paper. These are just going to serve as stencils, so I'm not really too concerned. They don't need to be cut from cardstock, and actually the lighter, thinner paper works a little bit better to use as masks anyway. So I picked out 2 colors that I'm going to use on the card, which is Peacock Feathers and Abandoned Coral. These are both distress inks. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply the ink through the stencil onto a piece of watercolor paper. So I have my watercolor paper cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And when I'm applying this ink, what I'm doing is I'm starting on the outside edge and I'm pulling the ink into the center area of the balloon. But I'm making sure to leave an area completely not covered with ink. I want to kind of have that depth of it really looking like a balloon. I want to create that dimension and kind of have that effect where the light's shining down on the balloon. So to do that, we're going to leave a section of the balloon completely not covered with ink, and then we're going to blend it out with a water brush. So I have a paintbrush here and I have a jar of water beside me. And the biggest thing you want to remember when you're doing this is you want very little water on the brush. So I have a paper towel in my hand and I'm just kind of dipping the paintbrush into the water, and then I'm pretty much removing all of the water from the paintbrush before I apply it to my project. If you have too much water on the brush, this technique kind of doesn't work because it pulls too much color into that area that we kind of want to keep a little bit lighter, and then it ends up not giving you the desired result. So less is more with this. You can always add a little bit more as you go if you find the color isn't moving as much as you want it to. So I always recommend start with less and then just add more as needed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to completely use the exact same process for this whole entire card front. So I'm going to take the 2 different stencils, and I created 2, 1 for each color, just so that I didn't have any color transfer when I was adding the new color onto the panel here. So for all the blue ones, I'm staying with that blue stencil, and then for all the red colored ones, I'm staying with the red stencil. And you will see that I do overlap the balloons a tiny bit in some areas, and this just gives the illusion even more that we have translucent balloons on our card design. They overlap very nicely because they are distress inks, and I'm kind of making sure where they do overlap that I'm not adding any of the water when I blend stuff out. So for this one, for example, in the corner here, when I do add the water from the brush, I'm not going over the area where it's overlapping the blue. I'm only adding the area on the actual red part. This will just help prevent that blue color from bleeding into the red color on the balloon. So I'm just going to continue this process, and I don't really have a design figured out. I just started with that blue balloon in the top corner, and I'm just kind of working my way around the panel and adding balloons until I'm happy with how many I have. Now I did know going into this that I want kind of an open area on the bottom right side of the panel, so I'm not going to completely fill this with balloons. I kind of want to have them across the top and then down the left side of the panel. So I'm making sure to kind of change up the colors that I'm using when I add the balloons so that we have a nice variation of the blue and red. And then I'm just going to go ahead and finish by adding a couple more balloons here at the bottom area, and then we're going to be able to move on to the sentiment stamp. And like I mentioned earlier, the color palette that I chose for this card design is kind of geared towards the 4th of July, so I'm using reds and blues. But you can definitely mix this up if you are going to create it for a birthday card or any type of celebration card. You can use the same that I did here and use 2 colors and just kind of change what those colors are, or you can go really fun and turn this into a rainbow design and use a bunch of different colors. So the only thing I do recommend, like I mentioned though, is that you want to use a different stencil for each balloon, which is just going to help prevent any of that color transferring into each of the individual balloons. So now that we have all the balloons finished, we can go ahead and stamp our sentiment. So I'm using this Celebrate from the Make-A-Wish stamp set, and I'm going to stamp it with black ink right in the center area of this panel. And I'm going to use my Mini Misty stamping tool to do the stamping, just because this is watercolor paper and I did do the balloons on the textured side. So since it is a little bit bumpy, it's nice to have the Misty so that I can double stamp the sentiment and really make sure I get a nice stamped image. So I'm going to stamp that twice with the black ink, and then I'm going to remove this from my Misty tool, and I need to add all of the strings onto the balloons. So I'm going to keep this relatively simple. I'm just going to take a black pen and my T-square ruler. This ruler is fantastic for getting really straight lines. I definitely recommend having one if you don't already have one in your stash. They're relatively inexpensive, and they're just a really great tool to really ensure that you get nice straight lines on your designs. So I'm just going through and adding all of the lines on here, and I'm making sure not to go right through the sentiment. I just kind of stopped at the top of the sentiment and then continued the line underneath. And then I just went ahead and added the lines to the rest of the balloons there, and then that's going to complete the design that we've created on the card. Now I want to trim down the panel to give it a finished edge, so I'm going to use the stitch rectangle die and just run this through my die cutting machine. And then once I have that fully die cut, I'm going to adhere it to a top folding grout gray card base, and that is going to finish the card design. And since it is a relatively flat card, I decided to add some sequins onto this, especially because it's for a celebration, so I think the shine and the glitz of the sequins really adds to the overall design. So I added a few sequins scattered around, and then I filled the centers with silver stickles. And then that is going to complete our fun celebration card today, which can be used for birthday or any other type of celebration, such as the 4th of July. Now it's time for our weekly giveaway, so if you would like a chance to win a $20 gift card to the MFT online store, please leave a comment on this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I will announce the winner in next week's episode of MFTv. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video.